Kia ora everybody and welcome back to Dune Spice Wars, a really fantastic strategy game, one I've played quite a lot of since it released in early access on Steam on the 26th of April 2022, but a couple of days ago. In this video, you're going to watch me play the Fremen, uh, house of faction that I really enjoy. It's spicy. Please, hopefully, you'll learn a thing or two, but what I'm actually talking about today is what I've learned about Dune Spice Wars, my mistakes, loads of different things. I think that Dune Spice Wars is a brilliant game. It's a real time strategy, definitely blended with a 4X game. And underneath that, or maybe more appropriately alongside of that, you have a detailed political system that can ultimately lead to you becoming governor of Dune through influence. You have assassination or domination attempts to go through the domination victory, backed up, of course, by intel, agents, espionage. It also, of course, is made by Shidor Games, who made a survival game, sort of territory management strategy game you might be familiar with called Northgard. That's the history of Dune Spice Wars and kind of where it's placed itself. I have noticed that the tags that people have added to it on Steam have changed over time. I see tags like city builder, political, survival, strategy, things like this surging to the front alongside 4X in real time. So, what have I learned about Dune Spice Wars then? First up, that framing is absolutely right, but it's confused a lot of people. And maybe me too, but not in like a this is what Dune Spice Wars is or isn't, but rather how we approach the game, how we play it. You see, it's a real time strategy game, but unlike others, you won't be commanding a whole load of military units. Military units are defined by command points. Here in this footage right now, you can see I have two of them and it's using just shy of half of my command points. They also have a pretty intense water, manpower, all sorts of costs associated to them, and upkeep costs as well. So maintaining a military in Dune Spice Wars is unlike maintaining a military in other real-time, and certainly unlike maintaining a military in 4X strategy games. And that was something for me that I had to learn going into it and really readjust to. Coming from a largely turn-based strategy background, Civilization 6, Humankind, Civilization 5, etc. Also notably largely historical. Although, it's important to note, I do enjoy a sci-fi, I do enjoy a Stellaris, I enjoy most strategy games, to be fair, but that's my background, and I had to really reframe my mind to play Dune Spice Wars. It's not about spamming a whole load of units, outnumbering your opponent, or taking up and getting stronger ones, and then crushing them. For multiple reasons. Firstly, in Dune Spice Wars, we're here to harvest the spice on Arrakis. And while there are definitely learnings and technologies that we need to develop as we move through, of course, different technologies for harvesting spice, agents, developing your military, so on and so forth, you're not starting from absolutely nothing. And so it makes sense then in Dune Spice Wars that you would start with all of your military units relatively unlocked. There are usually some of the later ones that need one or two developments in the military tree, but it's very easy to do. You're not playing through for 3, 4, 5 hours before you get access to everything in Dune Spice Wars. You've got access to most things within the first hour. From there, it's up to you how you manage the real-time elements of harvesting spice, commanding military units, using your scouts to continue to research or provide coverage for your units, right? You can highlight where enemy units are, move it over in enemy territory with some technologies, and you can even get extra benefits from it too. There's loads of different things you're managing in the real time, and that's playing out in practice. The other thing to note on this topic, on how the sort of 4X real time plays out, and some of the lessons that I've taken away from that, to reiterate again, goes back to that military standing. You will likely have a small military, and you will also likely need to not rely on it as your only crutch. It can be relatively easy in Humankind or Civ 6 to just build a big army and stomp all over everybody. Dune Spice Wars restricts that. It's not impossible, but it restricts it. And the other way that it restricts it is by making operations, that espionage, diplomacy element to Dune Spice Wars, but also making the influence, the governorship, the voting, as important as your military. You have 3 arms, essentially, and you're pulling them all at different times, to try and achieve victory. If you want to know more about victory conditions in Dune Spice Wars, I released a video on it yesterday going through all three of them, kind of four, because of course you can achieve domination through military might or through espionage. You can win a domination victory in Dune Spice Wars without putting a single unit in harm's way, in theory, through intel and operations and assassinating the leaders of other houses. And I think that really summarizes this point and this section of the video. My key learnings for this part have been that I really need to ditch my biases, ditch what I'm coming into this game with, and actually approach it like a blank canvas. It's real time, it's 4X, it's survival, it's a little bit of everything. Let's just call it strategy and move swiftly along. And secondly, going alongside that, military is not everything. And that's really the fundamental learning from that. Building on that a little bit, I think the next point is almost more important, actually. You see, military isn't completely useless, of course. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, you can see how powerful it is, particularly early on, of course, to run out and grab some extra villages. Absolutely vital. But actually, it's not just in conquest and in domination, and I find often I'm building units to think, how many do I need to take X? Maybe X is a village with 4 militia. I think, okay, I need at least 3 or 4 units to take this. And I make my units and I take it. And maybe I have 1 left over around the edges, defending a city or something. The difficulty here, and the really key lesson from this part that I've taken away anyway, and again, it is just early days, I'm absolutely not an expert, but I think that the rush to expand, one of those X's in the 4X, is a little dangerous in Dune Spice Wars. In fact, I think it's a lot dangerous. And that goes back to the fact that this game is firstly set in a very harsh world. This planet is rough as guts. There are giant worms coming out of the sand that can hear or feel your vibrations or whatever, and they're ginormous and they'll swallow you whole, right? The terrain is awful. There's barely any water. It's an absolute nightmare of a rock to live on. And that kind of bleeds through into the role of the military. I argue it is just important in Dune Spice Wars to defend as it is to expand. And you might say, well, that's the same in any strategy game. You need to defend what you've got. And to a certain extent, you're right. However, in other strategy games, it's easier to rely on either very quick movement, loads of different city defenses, right? From walls to specific units that can only defend to the populations living within the city. You name it. Natural terrain, another big one. There are loads of ways to defend cities in other strategy games like Civilization or Humankind. In Dune Spice Wars, currently anyway, there's really only 2. You either defend it with your military, or you defend it with a missile battery and militia. I've clumped those into one because collectively they are just strong enough, if you've got them maxed out, to stop a full army of rebels, say 4 or 5 rebels. So they're just enough to defend yourself. Spoiler alert, just enough ain't enough, maybe half the time, right? The real crux here is that this is a survival territory management game just as much as it is the 4Xs, the expand, the exterminate, blah, 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 blah. And so when you're going through it, I would advise a sense of caution, something I'm not particularly good at. Keep 1 or 2 military units around on your villages, okay? Especially on your spice villages. It might seem simple, and you might be tempted to pull them away to go and expand, but that is the biggest mistake you can make unless you're really confident that you can pull it off. Don't forget, there are other things playing about in this world too. As it's a military world, it's also a world of espionage and diplomacy, like I talked about at the start. 4 units sent into a territory to fight 3 might not be enough if your opponent is using operations that cut your unit's supply, that stop you from healing, and then reduce your power by 20%. The operations are incredibly strong when combined with a few military units. And again, that's that thing that Dune does really well. It's not just a military game. Plenty of those around, and I'm sure it would have been a great just military game. but it's those extra elements of espionage coming through that can help either provide you power to support what might seem like a relatively small army, or really screw you over if you're running out to expand. My takeaway from this section is therefore that combat is not everything with your military, and moreover, expansion is very harsh. Take it slow, take it easy. The spice territories matter a lot. Territories with other resources matter too. Territories with no resources are only useful for building blocks, right? Extra locations or adjacency bonuses. So bear that in mind when you're planning your expansion as well. Expansion is harsh, it requires water, it requires authority, it requires lots of units, and more importantly, actually, again, it's the rebels or the other opponents that will be your biggest threat here. It's hard to travel across the world of Dune, even with airfields built, which have their own relatively high upkeep costs. It can be difficult. If your economy briefly drops into the red, you won't be able to use your airfields anymore, for example. The takeaway here is be safe, be cautious, and do as I say and not as I do. Next up, one thing that really struck me, particularly after today's stream, but also after I was playing a few days ago, was the difficulty and the lack of reward or incentive for wiping out another player. Now, obviously, that should be difficult, right? I don't want to be just like destroyed in 2 seconds immediately. But man, it is really difficult to take a base, which you would expect. It's the heart, it's the whole. However, there are some fun things about it. For example, if you damage it, it can't heal. It's got 20,000 health, but you can come in and go out and come in and go out and slowly wear it down. If you watch my stream today as well, you will have seen that you can also use diplomatic missions, or votes, I should say. Or you could use your intel and operations to help weaken their base or stop it from attacking you back. There are ways around it to destroy it. And it's very important to do so if somebody looks like they're about to win, of course. If somebody is about to be voted governor of Dune, then you're going to have to move on them through either assassination or through domination via military means. And I've done that successfully a few times and unsuccessfully a few times, as is the learning curve with a new product like this. But one of the really takeaway, one of the probably the biggest takeaway actually that hit me was that there's no reward outside of getting rid of them. So if you need to destroy them because they're literally about to win, it's worthwhile. If you need to get rid of them out of a village to take spice, you don't need to destroy them completely, right? You just need to take that one village. Their home base or their city, whatever you want to call it, will never actually have spice itself. And moreover, the territory is not valuable really at all. Once you destroy them, it just poof, burns. And that's it. No reward. As far as I can tell, but I haven't looked into this one fully, so a little caveat here. This may be incorrect, but as far as I can tell, there is very little, if not no reward for destroying someone. I don't think you get any hegemony or score. So it doesn't count much towards, or at least it doesn't count any more than a village and the military, sort of combat points that you earned. Other than that, it doesn't count towards your score. So you can't really rely on it for hegemony. You don't get to capture the territory afterwards, or as far as I'm aware, even select a pillage on it. It seems to just disappear. This could be fixed, of course, through early access, but I'm not talking about a hypothetical version in future. I'm talking about what I've learned now, so that you can maybe take that away and learn a bit now too. The takeaway here for me is that if you want to pour all of your military resources, and again, these units, especially when you're starting to stack them up, if you don't have the Lansard guards who don't have any manpower requirements, they cost influence instead, then you're going to have a fairly large upkeep as you move through. It's not impossible, of course, absolutely sustainable, but it's a big commitment. Made even more difficult, of course, by the world's difficult terrain. Moving around this map is tricky. If you're playing like me here as the Fremen, you can ride worms every now and again. Otherwise, you've got airfields as a potential option, but that, of course, requires that you already own the territory and have the funds and spaces available to build the airfields and then have the money to use them. So yes, it's there, and my God, it's brilliant. But you can't necessarily always rely on it, particularly if you're starting to spiral downward. I think overall here, the real take home message then is that domination, wiping out an opponent, is not necessarily all that beneficial. Of course, there are upsides, but I think that a targeted approach is best. Obviously, if you need to take them out to win, and if that's your chosen victory condition, then take them down. The assassinations take longer, but in my somewhat limited experience, I think are definitely much more hands off. And despite having some sort of randomness added in, right? There's like these stage gates, if you will, that come up. It'll be like, oh no, one of your agents got captured. Do you want to pay $500 and have half a chance to get him back? Or do you want to pay 500 influence and you lose him, but the operation finishes twice as fast, right? There's these trade-offs that come up. But apart from that, it's fairly easy to manage the assassinations, so long as you've got a bit of time and, of course, the agents and intelligence to do it. That is unlocked primarily through the left-hand top side of the tech tree, though. So that's quite doable, I think. Big take-home here from me, then, is if you're going for the domination victory, don't necessarily go all in on military. You can do a combined approach. Build an army, send it to take the cities that are closest to you, and then through espionage and ultimately assassination operations, take out the one that's far away. You can use a combined approach to make the most of your shared resources, and I think that that could be a great way to do it. How does this translate to Dune's future games that I'm playing, and the sort of franchise's future moving forward? I think that obviously we're in an early access environment, and these things are all subject to change. But if you think through how the game plays and the careful balance that is ascribed to essentially between what I call, and I mean this in a good way, people for whatever reason interpret this badly, it's not. Dune Spice Wars is an ultimate game of paper, scissors, rock, constantly trading off 1 to 2 to 3 to 1 to 2 to 3, right? Whether it's water and authority, your two expansion resources, trade it off against manpower and military, trade it off against plascrete and solari, your money and your building materials. And then on a wider level, at the higher up level, you're trading off knowledge versus Landside Council versus operations, right? Do you want to earn knowledge or science? Do you want to earn influence? Or do you want to earn intel? Everywhere you look, you can see these paper, scissors, rocks, these beautiful combinations of 3. It's not always 3, but it is. And it can be. And you don't need to look far to see it. And that's the beauty, I think, of how I'm starting to frame Dune Spice Wars in my mind, relating right back to my point at the very beginning of the video. Military is powerful, but not in isolation. You can't just unit spam to win this game. It doesn't work most of the time. Moreover, though, you can see that ultimate paper, scissors, rock, that level of 3 playing out at the top too. Military, or domination. Hegemony, or sort of score, a reward for everything you've done. And might I add, a damn good one. It's giving you points. They seem to be fairly well balanced, although maybe they give a few too many to intel and operations. I find in an average game around, but get this, around a third of my hegemony is related to it. Interesting, isn't it? Again, it's the 3s. Dude, it's a conspiracy. It's a game of 3s. No, but back to my point. You've got domination, you've got hegemony, and then you have a political victory, politics, governorship, whatever you want to call it. Again, 3 things to carefully balance. And my final takeaway at this point then would be to think about which one's most important to you when you're going in. It's not so much like Civilization 6 where you need to place map tax all over the show to make sure that you've got every district in the right place moving forward and blah, 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 blah. You don't quite need that level of detail, although developments do have adjacency bonuses that you'll need to bear in mind. Moreover, you should be thinking about what's my ultimate victory condition. Trying as you go through to make sure you're at least competitive on hegemony in case it falls back to that, which it can. And disappointingly today, I lost a game to hegemony after taking out 2 players and the final remaining player beat me on score. Go into it thinking, how am I going to do this? Combined military and assassination or politics? And focus on one, but make sure that you keep all three tools close at your disposal. Thank you very much for watching today's video on Dune Spice Wars. I'm loving this game, and I'll be playing it more. I'll see you next time.